The fun thing about modeling the early 1970s is you get to watch F units pulling trains in long consists, Jeeps of various kinds going over old bridges of various kinds. And if you're like me, you have friends who like modern power. There's nothing wrong with that. And couplers. Oh, bangs. We have lots of bangs in this video. Hi, this is Burr Stewart, and welcome to part 124 of my continuing series of model railroad operations videos. I call them operations because we try to emulate prototype operations as much as we can, but we have a lot of fun too, which is why we call the channel Much Fun with Trains, and the operations series Operations. Makes sense, sort of. So this is a brace of 5 Burlington Northern F units that we saw in the previous couple of videos, but I never pulled a long train with them in this pure form. So we thought we would do that, and of course here it is. You may recognize some of these cars from previous videos because we haven't had an op session for a few weeks, and so things aren't moving around as much as they might. However, I did promise to show you these F units pulling a train, and sure enough, here they are.
Yeah, no, they're easy to work with, but it'll take some time.
Here's my favorite Hooker chemical tank car.
But I did good phone number. All the options, this is what I'm looking for, and I got
as well as a really nice Great Northern Blue plug door box car.
And it'll be about this long before.
And of course the X1 GN caboose, which probably should have BN numbers on it, but we'll get to that eventually.
And they get to making it quicker than you might think.
Yeah.
Magnus and I were joking about the inventory control system, which is non-existent.
Well, I finally got in focus. And it occurred to me that it would be fun to just keep raising the camera up higher and higher, and you get an idea of the vertical space on this layout. On the left there is the town of Opportunity on the narrow gauge branch, which comes up from the Delta yard, which you see there has got a lot of dual gauge trackage in it. So that's kind of a fun view. And meanwhile, over in the Burlington yard, Scott was trying to clean up the switching needs left over from the op session. Of course, 3 toots means he's moving backwards. And as you know, the Great Northern ran their Jeeps with the long hood forward, so this is a backwards move. Now, I was just rail fanning at the time, so I didn't know what Scott was doing here with these different cars. And if you go back a few videos in the series, you can see the Bo Edison Foods building on the backdrop is new, along with the ice platform that supports the ice reefers that were still happening up until 1973. Uh-oh, we got a bang coming. Bang! Very nice. Now, I didn't know what Scott was doing, but it appears he was picking up that very, very nicely weathered tank car. But it didn't work because he didn't bang hard enough. That's always an issue with model railroads. Can we keep our couplers lubricated well enough that they bang without too much pressure? I violate the rule by painting a lot of my couplers rust, and then they're a little sticky. And what I should do is clean them all off with a pencil or something, but I'm not going to start a list of things I should do. The bottom line is he did get that tank car hitched up.
Bigger modern units.
And he is, being a retired locomotive engineer, he is trying to follow prototype practices, as we'll see here in a second. And that's why you like this channel, because we do what we can to learn about prototype practices and carry them out when practical. Now you see he overshot that turnout. He's going to have to flip the turnout. And he just did that. I'll show some other good examples of flipping turnouts later in the video. At this point, I don't know whether he's going to charge down the main line or whether he's just going to set that car out right there, because that's the one he was wanting to pick out. Now you could, let's see what he does before I start pontificating about it. That brake is too long, brake action. Okay, he's uncoupling that car, which means he's setting it out, and he's going to put the other car probably back where he got it. But first he's going to show you how difficult it can be to uncouple a car. Yeah, I normally edit that out of videos, but I wanted you to see that if you felt bad about how hard it is for you sometimes to uncouple a car with a pick, don't feel bad. We all have problems with that. It's still better than many of the alternative methods for various reasons. So now watch this. The brakeman needs to get off that tank car, flip that switch, and he's going to get back on probably the left side of the tank car. He needs to be in position so that he can help put the knuckles together when he couples into the cut down there on the Anacortes branch that they're heading towards, right? Uh-oh, are we going to have another bang? Yes, we are. Ooh, going awfully fast, though. Bang! All right. 2 down, many to go. So now the brakeman could get off the locomotive and uncouple. Now, I just want to point out something that Scott does better than most people I know, which is he's setting it up for the future crew. See, he went ahead and coupled that tank car back onto the cut of tank cars on the Anacortes branch there so that somebody else wouldn't come in and try to pull the cut only to find that the cars weren't coupled. See what I mean? He did some extra work to make sure that happened. Now, for reasons we don't understand, he's going to go pick up this car and take it somewhere. I want to point out here, this Great Northern Jeep has been renumbered BN 1818. And of course, that's because the Burlington Northern merger occurred in 1970, and we're modeling 1973. So by that time, almost all of the engines in cabooses had been renumbered. Not necessarily repainted, but renumbered. Although Ed Austin has shown me a couple of photographs of cabooses that still hadn't, bang, gotten renumbered by 1973. So I'm happy with that. He's straightening out the coupler for some reason. This gives us a chance to survey the overall scene up here in the Burlington yard. So at this point, he's going to take that tank car somewhere. And the brakeman looks pleased with the situation. And that is a beautiful tank car. It was weathered by J.J. Johnson.
And that's the end of the show for the day.
Very nice. Very, very nice. Well, of course, if you're a fan of modern era railroading, I like to throw in an occasional run like this, mainly because Dave brings over his modern equipment and runs it here on my layout, and so we keep some modern boxcars out for his enjoyment. I don't mind him running the modern locomotives. I just mind pulling a bunch of 40-foot boxcars behind it because that just doesn't seem realistic. This looks pretty realistic if you ignore the UP Jeep in the foreground. We really need some ding-dings at this crossing, don't we? Speaking of the foreground, you got to admire the new engine servicing facilities for the Union Pacific, which Dave Enger just built recently, and I showed you that in the previous video, him doing what my uncle would call a drill job. Well, since we're modeling the early 70s, here's the PRR Penn Central Hammerhead, and this was a unique engine that was built with extra room in the short hood for a steam generator and dynamic brakes. We'll be running that a little later in the video. Here we have some switching on the back wall along the backdrop that Scott was doing a few minutes later. And he had to bring that car in to couple it again. Bang!
Come on, let's go.
And he did a much quicker uncoupling job there. Now, I'm personally a big fan of these old ACF, I call them triangle spot hopper cars. They were built, I believe, in the 50s, and they served the railroad well all through the, let's say, the 70s. I don't know how many of them. Yeah, they lasted beyond the 70s in maintenance away service. I saw them in Inner Bay Yard when I was rail fanning there in the 90s. There were still some of them over by the main office there in Inner Bay Yard on the Magnolia side, if you know what I mean. Here we are in the Burlington yard. That's the Burlington station there. And I'm not sure what he's doing with this car, but we're not going to wait around to find out because we have other things to do in this video. So after he finished straightening everything out in Burlington, he called for a run of the Local, which just runs a transfer job from Bayside up to Burlington and back. And Aiden was happy to do that, brought a couple of Jeeps up there and pulled all the southbound cars out of Burlington and brought them into Bayside. In fact, I think they brought them all the way into Inner Bay Yard. So the next time that we're rail fanning down there, you'll probably see this cut of cars down there. Those are some empty log cars that need to be taken back up to Skycomish. TC stands for the Troublesome Creek Railway, which is a fictitious logging line that we have. Ooh, those are nice Jeeps, aren't they? This is the Mount Vernon station, which is just south of Burlington. This piece of railroad is just a 6-inch wide piece of plywood that I put some curving track on and some hillside with trees on it, and it just looks great. But unfortunately, I learned about a photographer's trick, which is if you have a cell phone with a lens on the left, you can't aim down a bridge without your cell phone banging into the wall, and then you can't get lined up. Lesson learned. Love those general service gondola cars, don't you? There's our triangle spot hopper. Got in this train and it's headed on its way. Now for this shot, I had the camera on the right position, so I was able to hold it right in between the bridge girders and keep it reasonably in focus, and that is a very nice shot. Hope you enjoyed it. Meanwhile, I turned the camera upside down and took a different shot of this direction. Now we're coming down from Mount Vernon towards Everett, And that's what this part of the main line is. So I could take a nice shot through this bridge. But unfortunately, as you might see in the background, his train came apart. And so he had to stop right when he got to the front of the bridge. So we'll redo this shot some other time. Pretty cool though, right? So back up in Burlington, Scott was still hard at work.
The objective is to not do bangs.
Bang!
Like that.
And I noticed that that particular coupling job was perfect. It wasn't really a bang. It was just like a kiss.
Masterful.
Masterful, as I said there. So I wanted you to see it. See the way that knuckle just snapped in place? Here's a slow motion. This is a Kadee number 5 on the right and a number 58 scale head on the left. Bang! See that? It just clipped right in. So now we know that the coupler is engaged. And for those of you that think you can't mate scale head with regular Kadee couplers, that's proof that you can. And we do it all the time. Well, that wasn't enough. Oh boy, I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, so I saw a picture of this engine in Providence in 1971 before it was converted to a Lehigh Valley engine.
It's amazing how they just...
And I thought, we have to run this here, even if we're 3,000 miles away. This is a brand new Bowser model of an Alco that was specifically built for the Pennsylvania Railroad to replace a specific steam engine that was used in, I don't know where it was used, but it was a rare occasion where they ordered a single engine for a single purpose. And then I thought, well, we have a pretty steep grade down to Lego Town. Why don't we use this with its dynamic brake for running down there? I'm going to stop talking so much because you've got to hear how good the sound of this ESU decoder is. Sounds just like an Alco. Bang!
So we're just going to
Hear that? Hug a chug, chug a chug. So cool. So I had a friend visiting, and I told him that even though this engine doesn't really belong on this layout, we do have some Pennsylvania Railroad cars that it could take. And actually, when I thought about it later, it would be perfectly fine for this engine to take all 6 of these cars. They're correct for the era. The Burlington Northern boxcar would have been a recent repaint. But the rest of these are definitely from the 50s and 60s.
The momentum on this...
Well, the Grand Trunk, I don't know, that's probably too modern a car. It's definitely the Milwaukee. But we're just going to pick out this PRR boxcar. Now, I wanted to say something earlier about cherry picking. Have you heard of the term cherry picking? It's what you try not to do if you're a real railroader, but model railroaders do it all the time. And this is an example where you just grab one car out of a cut of cars and spot it somewhere else, and then you put the original cut back. It's a real waste of time and fuel and so forth. But on a model railroad, of course, we're just playing around, so I guess we don't care as much. Now what he's doing there is called setting the delay feature of a Kadee coupler so that when he shoves onto this caboose, after he wakes up the conductor, which you see he's about to do here, bang! Oh boy, that knocked the conductor right off his chair, no question. But if you look closely at the coupler there, it's delayed. It's pushed so it's not hooked up. And I'll show you that again. See how it's not hooked up and it just pulls apart? And that's called delayed action. At least that's what Kadee called it. And it's a really useful feature for switching because you see he didn't have to reach in with his pick a second time. He just set the delay feature back where he was. What a great sound. What? Oh, look at that. Our F-unit train was running around, and it came right through the yard right when we were switching. I didn't even plan on that.
This is working out well.
Be tired.
Whoops. He really wanted to show off how fast he could accelerate without a train behind him. But he's got a problem. Because his switching lead there goes out onto the main line where this train is approaching. So we had a big discussion about whether he had room to go to the switch points and come back in on his train.
I think he might have enough headroom.
Now, a real railroader wouldn't even consider that question. They would just kick up their feet and relax for a few minutes. But being model railroaders, we were anxious to get on with our project.
It's going to be really...
So I convinced him to try moving forward and see if he would clear the switch points. He was very skeptical. And in fact, he didn't quite clear them. And as you'll see here, the train actually caught, ooh, see that? That reefer caught on the engine and pulled him a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Very bad.
That's a little tighter.
Oh, I would have gotten fired for that. But he just pulled back and waited. We don't really mind because we love rail fanning. That's why we watch this channel, right? I'm really bad. I go back and look at my old videos and realize ways I can improve them. But if you ever want another rail fanning video, feel free to look back on my channel and see all the crazy videos that I have full of trains just like this, or better. So now he can finally clear the switch points. And come back on in here. I don't know if he's going to smash the conductor out of his chair again or not. Maybe not. Maybe he will. Bang! Ooh, that was pretty bad. I haven't adjusted the momentum on this engine yet. It's just fresh out of the box. I just gave it a quick weathering job, as you can see. There was no such thing as a 1970s Penn Central engine that looked as clean as they do right out of the box. So here we have a little Penn Central train. Unfortunately, the caboose is a New York Central prototype, whereas this engine, of course, is a Pennsy prototype in the boxcar. But I don't happen to have a Pennsy prototype caboose yet. But as you probably can guess, it's not going to be too long. I was a little bit late on the grade crossing, but at least we got to hear it. None of this seems to have disturbed the swing dancers at the station. Yes, indeed. Number 5569. Well, you can see he had to go slow because he was following that F-unit train, which you can see in the distance there. Gives us a chance to really admire this little miniature train and see that we're passing the yard limit sign, which means we're out in territory where you need to have some permission from the dispatcher to run your train there. Well, that's not even right, but we'll let it go for now. We'll talk about yard limits some other time.
Just honking at some rail fans that are too close to the right of way.
That's right.
That was great. Now in the background, you probably noticed some brand new tangent hopper cars. And these, I believe, were built in the late 50s or the early 60s. And they're really beautiful models. Here, the BN green one is what I believe is an old Concours model that I purchased at a swap meet probably 20 years ago. And then these are the brand new models that have much, much more detailed features. But we'll talk about that some other time. For now, we're going to wrap up this video, and as usual, I want to encourage you to look at all the other videos on my channel. There's lots of great rail fanning there, both prototype railroads that mainly near me in the Seattle area, and also on various model railroads. This one here, plus a bunch of people that I've been able to visit. And I do hope you've enjoyed this. And for now, this is Burr Stewart, wishing you much fun with trains.
Okay, well, we got everything but this. I talked to production, and it'll be about this long before they do that. And you want to see the numbers? Yeah, they're easy to
I've got people that they get to make it quicker than you might think. Minus now you're talking about the inventory control system, which you know, there are about 40,000 SKUs, and then everything control. So it's just in the world, so it's in the down instructions. That'll be for the